Bookcase and Coffee presents Buzzing About Romance, a quick shot of romance.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Buzzing About Romance, a quick shot of romance. On this episode, we are reviewing Spoiler Alert by Olivia Dade. I am joined by romance author Mindy McKinley in front of the podcast. Mindy has been a guest multiple times on the podcast, and she is also one of our Patreon supporters. Mindy is a contemporary romance author, avid reader, and cellist. She lives in the Midwest with her drummer husband and two adorable cats. In her life outside of writing, she's a music teacher, a small business owner, and a professional musician. Welcome to A Quick Shot of Romance, Mindy.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
I think this is the only kind of episode you haven't done yet.
I think so.
Because we've done a happy hour and we did a regular, well, you've had two. You are our only repeat guest on the podcast.
I am honored.
We are so excited every time we have you. You know, Leah's always like, we could talk to Mindy. I'm like, yep, we can talk to Mindy.
You can always talk to Mindy, especially in the summer.
Right? Because, you know, no students. Mindy is off contract. I've done saying like out of school or off work because you're not really on vacation. You're just off your contract.
I appreciate that. Yes.
This is Mindy's time. Okay. So like I said, we are reviewing Spoiler Alert by Olivia Dade. Mindy, will you read the synopsis from Goodreads for us?
Absolutely. Marcus Caster-Rupp has a secret. While the world knows him as Aeneas, the star of biggest show on TV, Gods of the Gates, he's known to fanfiction readers as Book AeneasWouldNever, an anonymous and popular poster. Marcus is able to get out of his own frustrations with his character through his stories, especially the ones that feature the internet's favorite couple to ship, Aeneas and Lavinia. But if anyone ever found out about his online persona, he'd be fired immediately. April Whittier has her own secrets. A hardcore Lavinia fan, she's hidden from her fan fiction and cosplay hobby from her real life for years, but not anymore. When she decides to post her latest Lavinia creation on Twitter, her photo goes viral. Trolls and supporters alike are commenting on her plus-size take, but when Marcus, one half of her OTP, sees her pick and asks her out on a date despite her critics, she realizes life is really stranger than fan fiction. Even though their first date is a disaster, Marcus quickly realizes that he wants much more from April than a one-time publicity stunt. And when he discovers that she's actually Unapologetic Lavinia Stan, his closest fandom friend, he has one more huge secret to hide from her. With love and Marcus's career on the line, can the two of them stop hiding once and for all, or will a match made in fandom end up prematurely canceled?
So this was released October 6th of 2020. The tropes are real body heroine, Hollywood romance, mistaken identity, slow burn, fandom, pop culture, and there does deal with mental health and disabilities. I would say this is a steam level of 2. And it was definitely a bit of a slow burn, like
yes,
a lot.
But I think it was on 50% on the dot.
Yeah. Which, you know, for me, it's a slow burn. Anything after 40 and I am, you know, in the realm of frustration. Do it already. Okay, so let's just break down our thoughts. Now, was this your first Olivia Dade read?
Yes, it was.
Okay.
I have been interested in her for a while, and this is my first one.
Yeah, she writes real-bodied heroines, which I just love. I know some people like to say plus-size heroines. I've started using the term real-bodied heroines because I think it's a little more encompassing, because I recently read a book with a woman that was dealing with anorexia, and she wasn't skinny because she wanted to be skinny. She was skinny because of emotional and mental illness. And so I feel like real body kind of gives a little bit more of a inclusive effect instead of saying plus size. So
I agree. I like that.
So, okay, let's break this down. In an earlier episode, we did break down 40 Love, which was also by Olivia Dade. This is not part of that series. These are two different worlds. They just are both by her. So just so everyone's aware, it's not a series. Okay, so let's start off with Marcus. Marcus Caster-Rupp. He is a Hollywood star on a fantasy cable television show Gods of the Gate, which is based off a series of books that deal with, was it Greek mythology? I think is what they're going for. Yeah. So what were your thoughts on Marcus? How'd you feel about him?
I really liked Marcus. Generally, some of the movie star portrayals I've seen show actors as people who weren't really working. They're more like living life and having fun, but they actually show him worrying about roles and practicing and how he's had to train and how he's become a different person because of his role. So I appreciated that, and that kind of also then sold his other secret that he's hiding, that he's actually smarter than he lets on. So I liked his layers.
Yeah, he did. He was a very complex character. I do think that this story is very much taken on the Game of Thrones fandom feel to it. And I would say Marcus's character would have been similar to like a Kit Harington, he was little known at the beginning of the series, and then as you get to the end of the series, he's a much bigger actor. And we'll get into the fandom part of it because that was, I think, a really big, I found it to be a little problematic. So we'll get into that in a little bit. But I think Marcus overall, for being a Hollywood star, he was really very shy.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't have a ton of confidence. He wasn't overly like, a lot of times Hollywood star leading men will have like a swagger to them.
Yeah.
And I don't feel like Marcus really had that swagger. He had a lot of confidence issues.
Well, I think his dumb personality had the swagger, but real Marcus doesn't.
Yeah. And yes, because he has different personas. He has his persona that is the one that he puts on when he's doing interviews and conferences and kind of the good time guy, not a lot going on. But when he writes in the fan fiction world and when he's himself away from his parents, and we'll get to the toxicity of those two people, he's actually very thoughtful and quiet and smart. Okay, so his love interest is April. She is a geologist by day.
Yes.
And a fan fiction writer by night, but also really into the cosplay part of the fan fiction. She's created a costume.
Yes.
Yeah. What were your thoughts on April? What did you think about April?
I liked April mostly. She was, I liked she was real bodied. I liked that she had gone through the trauma that many people with body issues go through and had dealt with it and felt like she was past it. Though she would say at the beginning of the novel that she loved her body, but then sometimes she would slip throughout the novel and say things like, I need to stop hiding. And I felt like we'd already established that she didn't want to hide anymore. And so I don't know if that was in direct relation to her being called out on the media for being overweight, but it felt sometimes a little bit disingenuous in places.
Yeah, I had a really hard time connecting with her, and she frustrated me a lot. Kind of for the reasons you say. Like at one moment, she's all like, I'm done hiding. I'm putting myself out there. She tweets the picture of herself in her cosplay outfit out to the showrunners of the Gods of the Gates and knows that there's going to be trolls and haters and blocks them out and doesn't deal with them. But then in other moments, like she takes the phone calls from her mother and kowtows to like her mother and is afraid to put out herself to. So in the midst of this, she changes jobs. And in her original job, she's afraid to out herself and who she is to her coworkers. And she feels like by starting this new job, she's going to out herself and be able to be more of who she wants to be. And so I felt like there was just a lot of internal push and pull, and she lacked the confidence that I've seen in previous characters from this author. So I don't know. I was happy when she started to find acceptance among her new coworkers. I thought that the friend side of this romance was really well done.
I agree. Yeah,
You
on
know,
both sides, both his friend Alex and her new work friends.
yeah, I mean, they have some kind of folk group, barbershop quartet. I don't know what they are. But, you know, they're quirky and weird all on their own. And so she did find this level of acceptance with them, which I really enjoyed that. So we talked about the friends. I felt like, so Marcus calls his friend Alex quite often throughout the book whenever he's like in a bit of a quandary, because part of what happens in this in the book is April tweets out this picture of her cosplay, and Marcus isn't going to deal with trolls anymore, and he asks her out, and they slide into each other's DMs and talk about how, you know, you don't really have to go. We can make this a non-issue thing. And he's like, no, I really want to go. I think you're beautiful. And she's like, okay. And when they're at their dinner and he realizes that she writes fan fiction also, because he is not out about writing fan fiction, and he calls his friend Alex for help and support. And that kind of bugs me a little bit sometimes, just because I get calling your friend, but he didn't have the confidence to make these choices himself. He needed, you know, like a buddy to back him up, to tell the truth. And
Right.
I just wanted to scream, man up, dude.
Well, then he also didn't follow Alex's recommendations most of the time.
Right. So, like, why did we call him? What was that?
I think it's just venting.
Yeah. So, okay, let's talk about the toxic families, because I think this is a bigger part of the story than anyone else let on. It was Marcus's parents. So Marcus has dyslexia, and his parents were educators at a very prestigious private prep school.
Yes.
Undergrade private prep school. And when Marcus was not doing well in school, his mother actually quit her teaching position and stayed home and tried to homeschool him. And they really just thought he was unteachable. Like, which
yeah,
teachers...
and I have a problem with that portrayal, because especially if they're at a private school. I mean, in this book isn't old. So, I mean, maybe if he went through elementary school in the 80s, that would apply. But I think most parents and teachers by now especially teachers, would know his issues with dyslexia.
Yes.
Or have him tested at least.
Right. Like, it just felt so extreme. And his mom and his dad, the way they talk to him and talk about him, they're like super self-involved. And so maybe that's how they didn't catch it. But I just can't believe that no one once said, he's telling you the letters are floating. Like, his friend and co-star Alex figured it out. Yeah. It's like, this is not, I don't know. As the mom of a, child with learning issues and challenges and stuff like that, I really felt like his parents just were dumb. Like, yeah. And the fact that so one of the things that's dropped within the story is they have written op-ed pieces on how the TV show destroyed the books. Right. And I don't care who you are, but you don't go after your child like that, ever.
Or, I mean, and it didn't go after him, but if you go after, like, so maybe my parents don't like the school I teach at. This is just but they're not gonna, I don't know, idea. You just don't try to tear the scaffolding out from under your kid.
Right. I mean, could you imagine your parent saying to you, I'm sorry, we don't believe in your ability to play Mozart correctly on your cello. So therefore, we're going to write articles in magazines and newspapers about your lack of ability to play Mozart or whatever. It's like, right. Really? That would be like my mom saying, well, we've decided you can't really talk and you don't know anything about romance. So I'm going to write an article and tell everyone not to listen to you. What? Parents don't do that. Don't gaslight your own kids. I didn't like them. Anyway, that's the lesson in that story. But then there is worse. There are April's mom and dad.
Whew.
Hot mess express there.
Yes.
So we'll just start with her dad, who's a total cocksucker that needs dick punched because he is not a good person.
No, he's a bag of tiny dicks.
Yeah. Yeah, like, he probably has a tiny dick, really. That's probably the problem. He is so hateful. Like, he just basically disconnects from April because he can't accept the size of her body. He's disappointed in her. He wants no association with her. He does not include her in family photos after she gained weight. Because, you know, all women know that as you start to age in your teen years, many girls, that's when their weight issues start to show. And so in her house, in her parents' home, there is no picture of her over the age of 11. Wow. Because at age 11 is when she started to gain her weight. Could you imagine?
No, and what he did to her mom, having gained weight after she gave birth to April. Yeah. It said something like losing 50 pounds in a month, which I can't imagine.
Yeah, it was like really a short amount of time she had to lose all this weight just so that he would even look at her.
Because he wouldn't touch her, he wouldn't take her out or anything.
Yeah. Yeah. Dude needs a dick punch for sure.
But several.
But her mother isn't any better because her mother is so desperate for the father's acceptance that she just plays along to whatever the father says and does. And so she is constantly at April about losing weight and eating healthy and working out. And this actually turns into a bit of an issue for April's self-confidence and in her relationship with Marcus.
Yes, it does.
And it kind of breaks your heart a little bit because this is a moment where Marcus's dumb persona comes out. He does not read the room very well in this instance.
No.
He is like, there was a problem? I didn't see a problem. But he thought he was doing the right thing. And so this is definitely a story of miscommunication and lack of communication. If they had just both had more confidence, more centered in themselves, they would have, not had as many issues as they had.
Well, and I think something I don't like about the parents so much is that I feel like these are believable sets of parents, but from a different era. I feel like these would be believable parents from the 60s. These would be believable parents from the 70s. But
well, so in this book, Marcus is 42.
Yes.
And April herself is 37. So they would have been
late 70s, early 80s.
Yeah, they would have been born in the early 80s, early to mid 80s. So I mean, the parents are definitely old school. So, and I know that we both struggled with this piece, so let's talk about this. The biggest piece in this book, outside of the relationship between Marcus and Olivia, was this fanfic piece to the story. It's so heavy in the book that someone outside the realm of fan fiction might have issues grasping all of it and the terms of it and the feels of it. And while I live on the outskirts of fan fiction, I don't personally read fan fiction, but I do have, my girl child is into cosplay and they talk a lot about fandom and stuff like that. It still made this story a bit stodgy for me.
Yeah. And I know this book was not written for someone like me who is not in that world. I know this was kind of a nod to the people who do live in this world. But I think it would have been better for other readers like myself who are totally outside this community if there was just a little bit less of it.
Yeah, or that it was made a little bit more relatable, because they do, when they talk about the servers the fan fiction is hosted on, it's definitely for someone that would be comfortable in that realm, that has done role playing or written fan fiction stories. The average person that just knows fan fiction is someone else's take on a story, they aren't necessarily going to understand the intricacies and the ins and outs and subservers and main stuff. And it really kind of weighed down the story and slowed down the story. And this is not a short story. This is like 400 plus pages.
Yes.
So I think because it was so intense, it took away from their relationship, the intimacy of their relationship.
Yeah, there was a lot going on in this book.
There really was. I would agree with that. I also felt, so in between certain chapters, as they were switching points of view, the script and the fan fiction interaction would happen in between. They would share pieces from maybe one of the fan fiction servers, or they would share scripts from the different shows and stuff in between the chapters. I don't think that added anything to the story.
No, it probably did for people who really love fan fiction. There was probably nods to other things and maybe references I don't understand. But yeah, for me it was a skim through, make sure I'm not missing anything super, because I'm interested in the story. I want to find out what's actually happening and not take a step back for a minute. It's like going outside during a wedding and then coming back in.
Yeah, I think it kind of also disconnected you out of the intimacy building between the two characters, because we got thrown into this other realm. And I felt that same way when Marcus would text with his different castmates from Gods of the Gate, that, you would have these moments, but it wasn't quite like a conversation with a friend. It was this outlying issue of the story, and if spoilers were being leaked about this last season, and it kind of disconnected for me the intricacies of this relationship.
Yeah, and I think the purpose behind them was to show her how she fell in love with Marcus's online persona. So, but then that kind of creates a love triangle that isn't really a love triangle, but it feels like it sometimes, because she's pining also for Bawn. Is that his name? BAWN?
Yeah. Yeah. The book Aeneas would never. Book Aeneas would never.
Yeah.
So Bawn. Yeah. I do want to just touch briefly on this, since it's a little spoilery. So, go forward 30 seconds. So I did feel like the wish fulfillment on this story was a bit over the top and too overt. I could have possibly overlooked a good-looking hero, but to have him as the sexy, famous actor who also loved to write fiction, who also happened to be a feminist, it was just too much. It was too over the top. He was too perfect, and it made it hard to make this HEA believable, in my opinion. So, I mean, him just being an actor and accepting her as she was, in all of her nerdiness and her geekiness and all of that kind of stuff, and her fan fiction and her love of the fandom, that would have been fine. That would have been just enough. But to make him a little less than perfect because he had dyslexia, and a little less, a little too perfect because he also happens to write fan fiction, it just became too much. So
I think it would have been enough for him to have been a reader of fan fiction and maybe a commenter on her fan fiction.
Yeah, but the fact that he wrote his own.
Yeah. Well, they are both multi-talented young people.
Yes. Okay, so let's get down to our 3 questions. So Mindy, did you like this book?
I did. I'm not as over the moon about it as I'd hoped I would be, but I did enjoy it. I do think, especially if you have any connection with fandoms or cosplay, or especially fan fiction, this book is definitely for you. So yeah, ecstatic, maybe not, but I did like it.
Yeah, I thought it was well written. It's a good book. It's not my favorite Olivia Dade, but it was good and worth reading. Who do you think would typically like this book?
Definitely romance, contemporary romance, like some steam, and also enjoy fanfic and fandoms of any kind.
Yeah. I think this almost borders on women's fic because it is really low steam, in my opinion. So really contemporary romance readers, but also the women's fiction people, I think would enjoy the story. If you have even a slight love of the nerdiness of cosplay and the fandom and excited about different kinds of fandom, this is totally a book for you.
Absolutely.
Mindy, would you recommend this book?
I would, especially to the right people. And there's a lot of great commenting about the process of writing in and of itself, about beta readers and brainstorming and things like that too, which I think so. If you're in the process of writing, that also might be an interesting way for you to look at it.
Yeah. I would recommend this. I just would make sure the person reading it is going to understand how heavy the fan fiction piece in this story is.
Yes.
So as everyone knows, we are currently playing Summer Reading Challenge Bingo. This book would qualify for Bingo Card 1, an illustrated cover. Bingo Card 1, published in 2020. Bingo Card 5, this is a traditionally published author. Bingo Card 2, couple on the cover. Card number 9, third person point of view. And then Bingo Card 7 for 2-word title and real-bodied heroine. And Bingo Card 3, because I borrowed this from my library.
All right.
Right? Got to give the love to the library. Okay, so that is it for this quick shot of romance. Mindy, thank you for joining us. We look forward to having you with us all summer. I think you and Leah are going to hang out next month and do a book together. So
Yes, so excited. Thank you for having me.
We love having you. Until next time, everyone, happy reading.
Find us on Instagram at Buzzing About Romance or on Twitter at Buzzing Romance. If you like the podcast, please leave a review. If you'd like to support us directly, join the Bookcase and Coffee Patreon and receive exclusive content only available to Patreon members. Check out bookcaseandcoffee.com for our on-the-shelf show notes.